Are the Toronto Maple Leafs finally going to stop talking about acquiring Colton Parayko and actually pull the trigger on the blockbuster trade that could transform their defense? Or are we going to watch Brad Treliving continue to circle around this 6'6", Stanley Cup winning defenseman without ever committing to the massive price it will take to pry him away from the St. Louis Blues? All right, folks, we need to have a serious, no-holds-barred conversation about the Toronto Maple Leafs obsession with Colton Parayko. This isn't a new rumor. This isn't a fleeting speculation. This is a persistent, ongoing pursuit that has dominated the trade rumor mill for months. The Leafs' search for an elite top-four defenseman continues to be the franchise's maximum priority, and the name that haunts every scouting report, every insider conversation, and every fan forum is Colton Parayko, the colossal 6'6", 230-pound defenseman from the St. Louis Blues. We've discussed him before, we've analyzed his fit, but now, as Toronto actively works to clear cap space by moving depth players like David Kampf, the pieces are finally starting to align for a potential blockbuster. The question is, will Brad Treliving have the courage to mortgage significant future assets to land the perfect archetype of what this team desperately needs? Let's break down why Parayko remains the obsession, what it will cost, and why this trade could define the Leafs championship window. Let's start with the undeniable reality. Colton Parayko is not just a defenseman. He's a game changer, a player who excels in physical hockey and elite shot blocking. His addition would solve the Leafs' biggest defensive problem, offering a rock-solid partner for star defenseman Morgan Rielly. At 6'6" and 230 pounds, Parayko brings an imposing physical presence that changes the dynamic on the ice. He's mobile for his size. He possesses a powerful shot from the point, and he's capable of playing heavy minutes against the toughest opposing forwards. He won the Stanley Cup with the St. Louis Blues in 2019, playing a crucial role in that championship run. He knows what it takes to win in the playoffs, and he brings a kind of championship pedigree that Toronto desperately needs. The fit with Craig Berube's system is undeniable. Berube demands a team that plays with more grit, more physicality, and more determination. He wants players who are hard to play against, who win puck battles, and who aren't afraid to sacrifice their bodies. Parayko embodies that style. He's not just a skilled defender. He's a shutdown presence who can dominate physically, clear the front of the net, and make life miserable for opposing forwards. His combination of scoring ability, physicality, and defensive intelligence is something the Leafs simply don't have on their current roster. A hockey analysis specialist stated, Parayko would be a game changer for Toronto's blue line. The combination of scoring, physicality, and defensive intelligence he brings is something the Leafs don't have. Coach Craig Berube demands a more physical team, and Parayko is the piece that can inject that DNA into the roster. However, the price will be one of their best prospects, like Auston Cowan or Fraser Minton, and probably a first-round pick. That quote encapsulates both the immense appeal and the daunting challenge of acquiring Parayko. He's the perfect fit, the ideal solution to Toronto's defensive woes, but the cost will be astronomical. The Blues are not in a fire sale. They're not desperate to move players, and they view Parayko as a cornerstone piece of their defense. Convincing them to part with him will require Toronto to offer a package that's simply too good to refuse. Here's where the harsh reality sets in. Parayko is signed through 2030 with a cap hit of $6.5 million per season. That is a substantial financial commitment, and for a team like Toronto that's already operating with minimal cap flexibility, taking on that contract would require serious maneuvering. They would need to move out significant salary to create the necessary cap space, which is exactly what they're doing right now by actively trying to trade players like David Kampf. The problem, as confirmed by Elliot Friedman, is that the Leafs have a deficit of draft picks. They don't have any first-round picks until 2028. This makes any significant trade an act of mortgaging the future. To acquire Parayko, Toronto would likely need to part with one of their top prospects. Names like Auston Cowan or Fraser Minton have been floated, plus potentially multiple second or third round picks, and possibly even a roster player. That's a massive price to pay, and it's the kind of all-in move that could either propel the Leafs to a Stanley Cup or cripple their long-term competitiveness if it doesn't work out. But here's the critical strategic thinking. The news that the Leafs are actively trying to shed players like Kampf is directly linked to the potential acquisition of Parayko. This isn't just about clearing cap space for the sake of it. This is about creating the financial flexibility to absorb a contract like Parayko's, even if the Blues retain a portion of his salary. The Leafs need to clear at least $3 million in cap space to have the flexibility to make this move work. The current scenario is one of preparation. The Leafs are selling unnecessary depth to create the financial room, and the ultimate target is a top-4 defenseman like Parayko. This is a sell-to-buy strategy in action. Toronto is strategically moving out lower-impact players to create the cap space and potentially the trade assets needed to land a franchise-altering piece. It's a calculated gamble, a recognition that the current roster, while talented, lacks the defensive foundation necessary to compete for a Stanley Cup. By clearing space now, Treliving is positioning the Leafs to make a bold move at the trade deadline, or even sooner if the opportunity arises. The obsession with Parayko is justified. He represents everything the Leafs have been searching for: size, physicality, defensive reliability, offensive capability, and championship experience. He's the kind of player who can elevate a good team into a complete championship-caliber team. He would be the anchor that allows other defensemen to play more freely, knowing they have a reliable, elite partner who can handle the toughest assignments. Imagine a defensive pairing of Colton Parayko alongside Morgan Reilly. That a combination of size, skill, defensive responsibility, and offensive creativity that would be incredibly difficult for opposing teams to handle. Parayko could take on the shutdown role, freeing up Reilly to unleash his offensive talents without having to worry as much about defensive coverage. Or he could pair with Chris Tanev, creating a defensive wall that will be nearly impenetrable. The flexibility and the upgrade in overall defensive quality would be undeniable. But the question remains, is Brad Treliving willing to pay the price? Is he willing to part with Auston, one of the Leafs' most promising forward prospects? Is he willing to give up multiple high draft picks, further depleting an already thin prospect pool? Is he willing to take on a long-term contract that extends through 2030, committing significant cap space for the next 6 years? These are the difficult decisions that define a general manager's legacy. Treliving has shown a willingness to be aggressive, to make bold moves, but this would be his biggest gamble yet. If Parayko comes to Toronto and helps lead the team to a Stanley Cup, Treliving will be hailed as a genius. If the trade doesn't work out, if Parayko struggles with injuries or doesn't live up to expectations, Treliving will be criticized for mortgaging the future for a short-term gain. Here's my strong opinion. If the Toronto Maple Leafs are truly serious about winning the Stanley Cup in the next 2 to 3 years, if they genuinely believe their current core can compete for a championship, then they need to go all in and acquire Colton Parayko. The cost will be steep, the risk will be significant, but the potential reward, a transformed defense, a legitimate championship contender, and finally ending the decades-long cup drought, is worth it. This is the kind of franchise-defining move that separates pretenders from contenders. The Leafs have been talking about it for months. Now it's time to act. What do you think, Leafs Nation? Should Brad Treliving pull the trigger and do whatever it takes to acquire Colton Parayko from the St. Louis Blues? Would you be willing to trade Auston, multiple draft picks, and take on his long-term contract? And how crucial is it for the Leafs to finally make the bold, all-in move that could transform their defense and their championship aspirations? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I want to hear all your perspectives on this potential blockbuster. And if you want to stay on top of every trade rumor, every strategic move, and every breaking news story as the NHL season unfolds, make sure you smash that like button and subscribe. We'll be here breaking down every significant development, and you won't want to miss a single update as we continue to chase that ultimate prize.